If approved for this appointment, Honorable Kindiki, what steps will you take to ensure that the two institutions work seamlessly for the benefit of Kenyans? And secondly, how will you strengthen IPOA so as to execute its mandate? Second, the Honorable Chair, is about urban criminal gang activities. In the urban areas, particularly in Nakuru, a criminal gang called Confirm, which by what the citizens claim has brought about 5 deaths in every month and hundreds of injuries. Maybe if you're approved and confirmed, what are the steps that you'll take to reduce the increase of criminal activities in urban areas, and particularly in Nakuru, specifically the confirmed criminal gang? Thank you, Chair.
Professor.
Mr. Speaker, on the first issue, the relationship between IPOA and the National Police Service is an ongoing conversation, and it's not unusual. It happens all over the world that the police and the bodies oversight them have normal institutional tensions. We have, during our tenure in office, we have encouraged these institutions to work together because each one of them is playing an important role. It is the same problem we had between the police service and the Police Service Commission, and we did a lot of work and around that, and were able to get a win-win situation where the commission and the police service are working together. So we'll apply the same methods if we are reappointed to make sure that IPOA gets the support it requires from the NPS, and going forward we will support IPOA in terms of more resources, more capacity, but also just brokering the institutional goodwill between themselves and the police. The second question, Mr. Speaker, is on the criminal gangs. It is true, we have had a gang in Nakuru known as Confirm, and urban crime is a major issue. When I took over as CS for Interior, October 2022, there was a lot of gang violence and gang crime in Nairobi. We've been able to reduce and suppress the Nairobi urban criminal activity significantly. We hope that the Nakuru matter could also be resolved, and before I was dismissed from office, I had had a meeting with the leaders of Nakuru County, and we had agreed that according to the feedback the leaders gave us, we needed to change the command, because sometimes many of these performance issues are based on the right command. So we are going to work on it to ensure that we eliminate that gang and other urban gangs in Mombasa and a few other towns that are suffering the same problem.
Robert Mbui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Professor, Kenya's constitution borrows very heavily from the US one, particularly issues to do with the Bill of Rights, and you swore to uphold this constitution and protect it. Recently, you saw in the US that a gunman tried to shoot a presidential nominee and was actually brought down, but despite that, and even missed, but despite that, the head of Secret Service resigned their post. Now in Kenya, during your tenure as CS, over 100 Kenyans have been killed, murdered by the police. You know that maybe over 1,000 people have been injured, and property worth billions of shillings has been destroyed. Not to forget that a lot of Kenyans have also been abducted, and as we are talking, there are still people, families that are still looking for their loved ones. Now, we did see that the Inspector General of Police resigned. Do you think that as a CS, you should not also have taken responsibility political responsibility for that failure that the resignation confirms, and also either resigned or declined the appointment. It's also important to note that during these demos that were held, a lot of people were shot, and there is clamor and request and for justice. In fact, I've attended, one of them was a constituent, Erickson Mutisia, and we've gone to those funerals, and the families are asking for justice. You have forensic evidence because you have the bullets, and you know that every bullet that comes from a gun can be traced. Why have we not seen arrests and arraignment in court of the police officers that are accused or that were involved in these shootings? Because that would appease the public a little bit. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to also point out that the CS has had, the nominee has had a very illustrious career. And, PhD, you've done consultancy all over. And when you are here for the approval hearings in 2022, after all those many years of working, your wealth was at 544 million. Now, 2 years later, your wealth now is at 694 million. That is a whopping 150 million shillings more. Maybe you could explain to us, is this increase probably related to the office that you hold? It would be important for us to know. And finally, Mr. Speaker,
too many questions, Robert.
Mr. Speaker, just one last one, because we are doing very well with time, Mr. Speaker. Just one last one, which is because I'm just picking out some of the things that some of the members have said on the matters of insecurity and criminal gangs, Mr. Speaker, that have been out there mugging our people. There's burglaries, in the North Rift, there are all these issues of cattle rustling and all that, which you have admitted there are issues. Now, my question is, when you know that we have such insecurity in the country, what was the logic behind making a decision to send 1,000 police officers to go and secure Haiti when Kenya has a problem? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Professor.
Mr. Speaker, those are three questions. The first one, the Honorable Boy asked about whether I should have resigned. The example the member gave about US, where the candidate for presidency was nearly killed, raises a number of issues. One, he says the person who attempted that was killed. That demonstrates use of force, even in our local context, is allowed, because nobody raised issues with that criminal who was wanted to kill Donald Trump. He was shot dead without questions. Number two, the honorable member has said that the director of the Secret Service resigned, but also drew a parallel and said our IG also resigned. The minister did not resign in the US. I don't know why the Kenyan minister must resign. And nobody asked the minister to resign, because ministers don't instruct operations, they instruct policy. I can only resign if my policy instruction is unconstitutional or illegal. Then, on the question of those unfortunate incidents when Kenyans lost their lives and the quest for justice, I strongly believe that there must be justice, and every death that occurred must be accounted for. However, Mr. Speaker, the process of putting together criminal investigations, including forensic evidence, is not something that can be done, can be rushed. It takes a bit of time all over the world, not just in Kenya. I believe IPOA should help the country to get closure, and I have promised, if I am reappointed, I'll encourage the collaboration and support and goodwill between IPOA and the police in terms of providing information so that justice is served. I have also been asked about my wealth, which has increased from 544 million to 694 million. It is true because, first, let me start by saying that I have not benefited from any improper business I have not done any business with government. Let's start from there. I have not applied for any tender by myself, by proxy, by relative, or by anybody. Mr. Speaker, before I was appointed, my wealth was at 544 million. I said at that time, which I still do now, that I've run a business, which today I do not participate in that business. I don't practice law, but my law firm is alive and working, and much of that revenue has actually come through the revenue from my law firm, which is still active but being managed by other people. I think all my salary and allowances have been spent in paying bills. Therefore, most of the increment in my net worth is because of three things. One, the legal fees, some of which was actually pending by the time I was being appointed, and I said it here, that there are some unpaid legal fees, which some of them were paid. In fact, I remember 2 months after I was appointed, one of the clients paid a significant amount of legal fees, which had been pending. Other than that, I do small businesses and so forth and so on. None of my money has come from the public except the salary and the allowances that I'm entitled to. Lastly, on Haiti, it is true that the government of Kenya, through the National Security Council, decided to deploy our officers in Haiti pursuant to a request by the UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly. These are international obligations. It has not affected our operations, and it is not true to say that since there are problems in Kenya, we cannot also do our international obligations, because all countries in the world do have security issues. They have security matters. Even the country you consider safest has its own security matters. And therefore, it is a great honor for our officers to serve in Haiti. So far, they are doing a good job. I believe they will profile Kenya properly. They will bring honor to our country. And that deployment has not affected our operational capabilities. I submit.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you.
Don't be like your neighbor. Ask one question.
I'll ask only one question, Mr. Speaker. Professor Kithure Kindiki, in your first stint as CS Interior, you are associated with strong statements, such as "we will crush you," you'll be met with the full force of the law, "we will deal with you firmly and deadly," and many other words like that. Statements which seem to fuel police extrajudicial action. And Kenyans have taken notice of such statements that probably they fuel police extrajudicial action, and the use of excessive force, because if you tell people we'll crush you, the police will crush you. That's what it will entail. As you see now, there's a new awakening in this country about what public officers are saying. How different will you be if we approve you? Secondly, you are also the civilian face among the police and the security organs that we have. But as you took up this job, probably Professor Kindiki, you became more of them, more of a police officer, not a civilian within. You are donning police uniform, you are all over police choppers, and you behave like a police officer. Which probably took you away from the police direction that you're supposed to give the forces, and became more of an operational leader instead of a policy director in the force. How will you be different on this? And probably lastly, you are more in the sky than on earth. when you want to give policy direction, you want to give guiding, you need to be in office, have meetings, boardrooms, and give policy direction. But you have said you actually went to Lamu 21 days, 21 times in 21 months. And probably in the operation field more than where you are required to give, operational or to give policy guidance and direction. And that's why the police force and the administration, national government administration, is not properly coordinated. How different will you be as when we approve you as CS? I thank you.
Professor?
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I've been asked to say whether I'll change my language. Mr. Speaker, I need to clarify that it is true I have used very, very unique language, but Mr. Speaker, this is security language. And the people I address when I use those terminologies are not the law-abiding citizens of Kenya. The people I address with that difficult terminology or unique terminology are terrorists, bandits, organized criminals. Those are the people I tell will crush you, and I mean it. Last time I appeared before here, the member for Samburu West asked me what I will do in Kurkur and other places when criminals descend into gorges, and I'll say I'll flatten the gorges. We've done a bit of that. There were places in Baringo, Corcoran Hills, a place called Tandare, a place called Ngelecha, and in Samburu, the Malaso Valley and other places where criminals would always retreat and have a field day, operate from there. We've neutralized them and removed them from there. So, again, the use of force is permitted by law, depending on who that force is used against and in what circumstances. And the escalation methods are used. You start by asking them to surrender. If they don't, you use other methods until, if they challenge you or they want to kill police officers, the police officers will kill them before they kill the officer. That is the law. Mr. Speaker, on the second issue, I have been there at headquarters driving policy in boardrooms, Arambe House. I've had so many meetings in our campuses in Kiganjo, in Embakasi, Roiro, Police Leadership Academy. But I've also been in the field more. Why? To disseminate policy to our forward operating bases, to our camps, to our officers in the field, in the counties. And even in the counties, before I even start my meetings, I would sit with the county security committee in a boardroom, disseminate the policy, because they are the ones who will be left to implement. And I have also been in the most dangerous spots in our territory with our officers in the front line. Why? To give them moral support, that we have not posted them there to die. We have posted them there to protect the country, and there is no greater morale booster than for the security minister to go and visit the officers, have lunch with them, encourage them, and tell them what the government policy is and what the government thinks about them. So it has been very rewarding. I will be back in the normal manner, but I will of course balance between my headquarters work and also the field work. Lastly, I've been asked to land. I have always landed. For every flight, I have landed. And finally, on the issue of uniform, what I wear is tactical attire, because there are some things which protective clothing that you need tactical wear to be able to have protective clothing and protective facilities, because you're in a dangerous situation. I don't wear that on the streets of Nairobi. And also, I have been in not just police helicopters, but military helicopters, because the law provides that the security minister be facilitated when he is in dangerous situations. The Minister for Interior, the Minister for Defense must be facilitated, because the nature of our work is we are exposed to risk and danger by virtue of office. Otherwise, I do not fancy it's only that it's all in a day's job.
Murugara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On a CS nominee, let me take you away from the police officers, the bandits, and all these other insecurity matters you're dealing with, back to national government administration. I recollect very well that when you were here, we actually questioned you on it lastly during the vetting, and emphasized that the nerve center of the national government administration is in the villages. That we do have very serious workers in the villages who possibly are not recognized by the national government, but who play a key role in the service and security provision and everything else, so that we can avert incidents like the Shakahola and the quarry incidents we've talked about. Here I'm talking about the village elders and the Nyumba Kumi workers, whom you use extensively 24 hours every day, every month, and every year, and in a form of service which is very similar to servitude or some form of modern day slavery. These people are not remunerated. Your response that time was that a policy was going to be put in place immediately, and that they would actually start getting a form of remuneration. The question I have to you is, how far has that gone, and when should these people expect their paycheck? Whether check, whether M-Pesa, whether whatever is going to be, when should they expect to be paid?
Mr. Speaker, sir, we have finalized the Village Elders Bill 2024. It is one of the 12 pieces of legislation that are awaiting cabinet approval for transmission to Parliament, and therefore that matter will be sorted out in the shortest time possible. I submit.
Waziri, I want you to again go back to Haiti, where we actually deployed almost 600 police officers. My fear now is that with what is happening around there, the fact one of my voters at home has one of his son actually deployed. And the question is, how secure? Do you have special security, insurance for this particular, just in case something has happened? Of course, that has led to a deficit of police officers. That's why when you had demonstration here, you had to get in the army because we don't have enough police officers, so because some of them are away. Secondly, I also have had a case in North Rift. In fact, my colleague is just walking in. The North Rift, where you have this police reservists have been disarmed, and yet we have problems in North Rift. And those are my borders, and we have that problem. And yet you have actually disarmed the police reservists. What are you doing about that?
Professor, will take Daoud, note the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The CS nominee, you have promised regarding passports a couple of times, and you know passports are the most important. You initially said within a day, within a week, within 2 weeks, but apparently the passport issue has not been sorted out. The other issue is regarding the IDs. Your department has rolled out that IDs will be 10 years, whereas we have known all along IDs did not have an expiry date. What informed the decision for that one? Because now we've got Maisha number, which has been already declared unconstitutional. But what was the point of launching Maisha number when we had a Huduma number which did not work? So now, first was we've got the original ID, now Huduma number, now Maisha number. So aren't we confusing everything? Can't we have just one, the ID to be upgraded instead of all those, and data protection? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Professor, you can answer those from Ferdinand and Rahim.
Mr. Speaker, with regard to the question by the member for Kwanza, Haiti is a United Nations mission. Therefore, our officers are covered, insured, paid for by the United Nations, and therefore there is no cause of alarm. But it's also good to report good progress so far, because the officers, they have been able to get part of the critical infrastructure, the port, the airport, the main police station have been recovered, and the hospital have been recovered from the gangs. And some of the gang leaders who were taunting us before have even signed for peace and are willing to engage. So they are doing a good job. We are praying for them. We hope there will be no untoward incidents. With regard to the second issue from the member for Kwanza, it is true we disarmed 400 National Police Reservists who were serving in Trans Nzoia. And there was a reason, because the NPRs were being misused. Number two, Trans Nzoia is fairly peaceful, except along the border, small issues. So we will be vetting and returning on a needs basis a smaller number of NPRs, but the number of 400 NPRs in Trans Nzoia was disproportionate with the challenge that we have in that county compared to other counties that are a little more needy. Then finally, the member for Imenti North asked about passports. When I assumed office, passport was a crisis like no other. Kenyans were waiting for a year, 6 months, 3 months, 8 months. They were bribing. They had to bribe to get passports. We had no printers, and so forth and so on. Today, we have not only paid the pending bills to the suppliers, we have enough printing equipment for personalization of passports. We have even upscaled our system, that is the ICT system, and we have cleared the backlog from 784,000 when it was at the highest, and today there's no backlog. We are issuing passports within 7 days, starting 1st of August, today. That was our deadline. We complied with that deadline 4 weeks ago, at the beginning of July. Our next deadline is therefore to bring the passports waiting period to 3 days by 1st of November this year. And we are on course. I am very happy. This is one area where we've made a lot of progress. Of course, there are small challenges here and there. We believe that we've not eradicated corrupt staff completely. We have a new crop of staff, about 120, but we are not sure that corruption has been eradicated from that directorate, and we are working on that to ensure, we'll be working on that if we are approved, to ensure that we clean up the whole place. With regard to IDs and Huduma number and Maisha number, the reason for the 10-year limit is because of technology, because unlike the ID that we are used to, the second generation ID we have, the third generation ID is a technology card. And technology keeps on growing old, and therefore that's why we have a 10-year period, and that's why even passports, they normally have a time frame. You cannot have a passport for life. That is the idea. It is not to punish Kenyans. The card has a bit of technology chips, and we want to upgrade that chip based on the security threats that will be identified by that time. The orders that were issued 2 days ago, because the problem we are having with delays with issuance of IDs is because of court orders. Last year, between November and March this year, there was a court injunction against us issuing IDs, which brought a huge backlog of almost 600,000. We cleared that backlog. We were actually left with 92,000 with those in the waiting list. And then another court injunction was issued again 2 days ago. We hope we'll be vacating it by Friday, hopefully, so that we can be able to move on with issuing IDs to the people of Kenya. I submit.
Mercy.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Let me take you to the budgets. Following the recent government budget cuts across all sectors, how will you use to mitigate the negative cuts in the Ministry of Interior and National and national security? Secondly, what will you prioritize if approved? What programs will you prioritize, and what will be the impact of implementing those priorities? And Kenyans are also asking, because of the unemployment situation in the country, is the recruitment of police officers affected by the budget cuts? And if not, what innovative ways again will you use to recruit them differently? Because as it stands, Kenyans are concerned that recruitment of police officers has become a preserve of the rich or of those who can afford to sell some land. So how are you going to make sure that employment opportunities in the Ministry of Interior, irrespective of their tribe, their religion, where they come from, whether they have money or not? Thank you.
Hold, Professor. Yes, Missy, take those two.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prof, you'll go down the history as the first minister to be vetted twice in one term, one presidential term. Of course, the others who are coming, but for now you are the first, and that history will not be, will be there forever. And I'll take you back to what you said in the Senate, that history is replete with strong and powerful dictators who were brought down by the power of the people. And I dare say you've been brought back here to this vetting by the power of the people. I want to refer you to an event because you are a member of the National Security Council. This is the core of the security of this. I want to refer you to an event in history in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, something I know you are much aware of because you are an international law student or professor. During this time, the then president of US, J.F. Kennedy, had a standoff with the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev. And there was an EXCOM committee members, comprising of 14 members, almost akin to what we have here as the National Security Council. All those 14 members agreed that to deploy. It took J.F. Kennedy brother's advice to do otherwise. I'm not asking you to be consulting your brother, but if it were not for the brother's advice, then we could have experienced the first nuclear war to the destruction of the world. Now, I look at the events that have happened here as a result of either good or bad decision of the National Security Council. And just like somebody said that there is always an inclination towards consensus, even if a decision is bad, that the committee of people could easily incline towards psychological consensus to the destruction or to the results of a bad decision. does National Security Council of this Republic also suffer from groupthink? Groupthink in a way that there is no devil's advocate to give an alternative decision making that can save the country. Then, Speaker, if you may allow me the last, very brief. You've tried to explain the donning of the uniform, the police uniform. What surprises me, Prof, is that you give instructions to police, you give press conferences, you are adorned in the uniform of the police. But when it comes to the crimes committed against humanity by the police, that's where you say the police are independent. How independent is your uniform?
Professor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with regard to the budget cuts, we will prioritize what we consider the 5 biggest national security threats in our programming. And those are the threats of terror, organized crime, drugs, the need for drug controlling narcotic drugs, the fight against climate change, and also extremism in its various forms, religious, political, or whatever extremism, because extreme behavior can annihilate the nation. With regard to recruitment, going forward, we will ensure that each and every Kenyan, boy or girl who is recruited, can be accounted for. Because in the past, we've had so many claims of corruption and so many claims of favoritism, and therefore going forward, it's going to be demanded from the police that they account for every recruitment slot that they fill. We have a big problem of corruption in the country, and we hope the National Police Leadership Academy and the programs we want to put there as we look for succession management and new managers of security will be able to fight corruption in the National Police Service. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Amisi asked me, I think the first was just a comment. He said, I've been brought here by the power of people, and I want to say happily, yes. Happily, yes. With regard to the second, and I say happily because it's important for public officials to be put under scrutiny and be measured using the highest possible threshold. So I have no issues, I have no problem. Even if I'm brought here 20 times, I will happily come up and try and explain myself to the people of Kenya and to the representatives of the people of Kenya. I've been asked, the second one, the last one, from the Honorable Amisi, was on whether the National Security Council is suffering from groupthink, and the answer is no. I submit.
Mukami. Honorable Mukami.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to ask our Waziri one question from a police officer who is concerned. I understand there is a court battle in the court since 2018 between the police constables. There are those who are earning higher salaries than the others. That means there are those who are in job group J, they are earning more salary, and that is why they had gone to the court, because they want to understand why there is a discrimination. The other question, it's about our police officers. Waziri, as you know, our officers really do a lot of work. What policy are you going to put into place to motivate our police officers? Because there are those officers who have stayed in one station for over 20 years. They've never been promoted, they've been never transferred, they are just there in that station. So we need to motivate them. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Mishi, Honorable Mishi.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, I want to ask Professor one question. Professor, as the women of this country, we are shocked and we are sick to see the rising number of femicide cases. In fact, we are really shocked when we saw the bodies which were discovered at the quarry, because all the bodies were for ladies or other women. I don't know what is the root cause of this. What contribute to all this? Who slept on the job? We need to know some answers on these issues. Second, Honorable Chairman, I know he has answered issues on the issue of officers using excessive force during protest, but I also wanted to hear from him, what future plans do you have to ensure that future protests are going to be managed in a way that there'll be no loss of lives? Thank you, Honorable Chairman.
Professor?
Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard...
Hold, Professor Emaso, you have a point of order?
I think the nominee forgot to respond to mine.
Which one?
It was on the budget and the issue of recruitment.
He did.
I think I can respond together.
He did.
Okay.
He did, very clearly. I know I was misleading you to raise that issue.
Mr. Speaker, with regard to the police officers who have been in court about salaries, mainly these were graduate police constables, people or officers who joined at constable level. During their time, they went to school and studied for a degree. They have been arguing that they need to be taken straight to inspectorate. And there has been a long court battle. As soon as that court matter is settled by the apex court, we'll implement whatever decision will come from our judiciary. With regard to that matter going forward, we will implement the recommendations of the Maraga Task Force, which creates two-tier police service where you can serve in the lower ranks, and the academic requirements are different. You serve from constable to senior sergeant, or you enter the police service at inspectorate level if you are a graduate as a cadet, so that we professionalize a little more the police service and also expedite leadership generation through cadets who can assume responsibility as OCSs and command